Hello, my name is Tristan. I'm 25, a systems technician at TDS Systems, a tech company with over 500 employees where my existence barely registers beyond the error reports I fix. I'm the guy who crawls under desks at midnight to reboot servers, the one who logs extra shifts without complaint because I know one slip could mean the end. My life is a quiet grind. A small apartment on the outskirts of the city, instant ramen dinners, and weekends spent tinkering with code on my beat-up laptop. I don't chase promotions or office politics. I've learned that staying invisible keeps me employed. But that night, everything shifted in a way I never saw coming. It was the company's end-of-year party at a four-star hotel downtown, the kind of event where everyone pretends to bond over free booze and forced small talk. I showed up in my old button-up shirt, ironed just enough to not look sloppy, planning to grab some buffet food, nod at a few faces, and slip out early like always. The lobby was buzzing. Colleagues dancing under strobe lights, clinking glasses, snapping selfies with fake enthusiasm. I felt out of place, like a shadow in a room full of spotlights. My head was already throbbing from the music, so I headed to the restroom to splash water on my face and clear my thoughts. Pushing open the door to the men's room, I heard a sharp thud, and then Paul burst in, slamming it shut behind her body trembling like she'd just escaped something terrifying. I froze, my heart pounding. Paul was my manager's manager, the woman who commanded boardrooms with a single pointed question, always poised in her tailored suits. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and unflappable, the kind of leader who made you straighten your posture just by walking by. But right now, she looked nothing like that. Hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed, her evening gown slipping off one shoulder, one heel broken. You came to the wrong one. This is, I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper, gesturing weakly at the door. Before I could finish, she grabbed my arm, pulling me back against the wall, her grip desperate. "Don't go out there, please, don't!" I stood there, stunned, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her perfume mixing with the sterile scent of the tiled room. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide with a vulnerability I'd never imagined from her. It was like seeing a fortress crumble in real time. My mind raced. Was she hurt? Chased? I scanned her face for bruises, but there were none. Just raw fear etched in every line. I don't know who else to trust, she whispered, her voice cracking, tears welling up but not falling. They're talking about me. I heard them, every word. What? Who? Are you okay? I can call. No one hit me, but their looks, their words, it's like they're choking me. She leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror, her knuckles white from gripping the edge. Then, suddenly, she turned to me, her gaze piercing through the haze of her panic. I know you're struggling. I've seen your reports, the overtime, the server cleanups at 3 a.m. You keep going. You stay silent. You know what? I wish I could be as resilient as you. Her words hit me like a cold wave. Me? Resilient? I was the guy who blended into the background, fixing glitches while everyone else climbed ladders. Paul, the powerhouse who led teams through crises, envying me? It didn't make sense. My throat tightened as memories flooded in. The late nights alone in the server room, the ache in my back from hunching over keyboards, the quiet fear that one day I'd be obsolete. I'd buried it all, convinced no one noticed. But she had. I just want you to know, I'm not letting you sink, she said, her breath steadying a little. You're the only one I see who's like me, but hasn't given up yet. I didn't know what to do. My hands felt useless at my sides. Part of me wanted to bolt, to pretend this never happened. But another part, a deeper, unfamiliar pull, kept me rooted. It was pity at first, mixed with confusion, but as she stood there, so exposed in this absurd place, I felt something stir. A quiet ache, like recognizing my own hidden wounds in hers. The age gap flashed in my mind. She could be my aunt, for God's sake. But it didn't matter. Not here. The hum of the ventilation fan filled the silence, a reminder that the party raged on outside. I thought of my own isolation, the way I'd learned to swallow disappointment like bitter coffee. If you're me from 15 years ago, then maybe I need you now, I murmured, pulling a tissue from my pocket and handing it to her, my hand brushing hers slightly. She took it, her fingers lingering for a second longer than necessary. Not like an object, but like a lifeline. The air between us thickened with unspoken truths. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about her breakdown. It was a bridge forming between two people who'd both been invisible in their own ways. "I've just emailed you a file," she said, her voice firmer now, wiping her eyes. "It's a mentoring program I'm proposing quietly, not ready for the board yet. You're the first one I'm picking." "Don't say no," she added, looking up at me with a steely resolve that chased away the earlier fragility. "Because if you quit, everything I've endured, it'd be for nothing." I held my breath. She wasn't here for comfort or pity. She was reaching out to someone like her, begging me not to repeat her scars. And for the first time, I understood what it felt like to be believed in when I didn't even believe in myself. The door stayed shut, but in my chest, something unlocked. Strange, chaotic, irreversible. That night, after slipping out of the party unnoticed, I drove back to my cramped apartment on the edge of the city, the hum of the highway blending with the echo of Paul's words in my head. The place was nothing special. A one-bedroom rental with peeling wallpaper and a kitchenette that smelled faintly of takeout. I collapsed onto the couch, my shirt still rumpled from the evening, and pulled out my phone. There it was, an email from her, time-stamped just minutes after our encounter. The subject line read simply, "Mentoring Program Confidential." My fingers hovered over the screen before I opened it. The file attached was a detailed proposal, pages of structured outlines on supporting junior staff like me, skill-building workshops, stress management sessions, even one-on-one guidance for those feeling lost in the corporate machine. It wasn't flashy, it was practical, born from experience. She outlined how it could reduce turnover, boost morale, but reading between the lines, I saw her own story woven in. The late nights, the isolation, the quiet battles. I sat there in the dim light of my lamp scrolling through it for hours, my mind replaying her trembling voice, her grip on my arm. Why me? I wasn't special. Just a tech guy fixing glitches, blending into the background. But she'd seen something in me that I hadn't. It felt like a mirror held up to my own hidden struggles. The divorce of my parents when I was a kid, leaving me to fend for myself at 18, scraping by on odd jobs before landing this gig. I'd buried that pain, convinced silence was strength. Now, here was someone older, more accomplished, saying she saw herself in me. It stirred a warmth I hadn't felt in years, mixed with a nagging doubt. Could I really step up? I didn't sleep much that night, tossing on my lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin. By morning, the decision crystallized. I hit reply. "I'm in, thank you." Simple, but it felt like committing to more than a program. The next day at work, everything looked the same. The fluorescent lights, the cubicle walls, the hum of keyboards. But I felt a shift inside. Paul didn't acknowledge it openly. We couldn't risk gossip. Instead, she suggested we meet discreetly in the office lounge before the rush, or at a nearby coffee shop after hours to avoid prying eyes. Our first real meeting was at a quiet cafe down the block from the office, the kind with worn wooden tables and the scent of fresh grounds lingering in the air. It was after 6 p.m., the sun dipping low, casting long shadows through the windows. She arrived a few minutes late, her professional blazer swapped for a simple cardigan, looking more approachable than the powerhouse from the boardroom. We ordered black coffees, hers strong, mine with a splash of milk, and sat in a corner booth. "Tell me about your journey here," she said, stirring her cup slowly, her eyes steady on mine. There was no rush in her voice, just genuine curiosity. I hesitated at first, my words stumbling out. I talked about my parents' split, how it forced me to grow up fast, working retail shifts through high school, scraping together tuition for community college before dropping out to chase steady pay. "I've always felt like I'm just surviving," I admitted, staring into my coffee. "Fixing systems is easy, fixing myself, not so much." She listened without interrupting, her expression soft but attentive, nodding at the right moments. When I finished, she leaned back, a faint smile touching her lips. "You've done better than you think, Tristan. Most people in your shoes would have cracked by now." Then she shared her own path, her voice low and measured, like unearthing old memories. She started as a dishwasher in a diner during college, moved to overnight stocking at a 24-hour store, endured harassment from bosses, but bit her tongue because rent didn't pay itself. "I climbed because I had to prove I wasn't disposable," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. but it left scars. Nights alone wondering if it was worth it. Her honesty disarmed me. Here was this woman, over a decade my senior, peeling back layers I'd never seen in anyone at work. The age difference hung in the air unspoken, but it didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a bridge. Her experiences illuminating my own uncertainties. As the weeks passed, our conversations became a rhythm. Text messages started simple. Check this article on debugging stress. Then calls after long days, her voice a steady anchor when I vented about a botched server fix. We'd meet in parks or quiet spots, away from office eyes. She shared tips: how to craft emails that got noticed, how to speak up in meetings without fear. I felt myself strengthening, standing taller in team huddles, volunteering for tasks I'd once avoided. But beneath the professional growth, something deeper brewed. I'd catch myself thinking of her smile, rare and genuine, or the way she hid her exhaustion behind determination. The gap in our years made it feel forbidden, yet it drew me in. Her wisdom a balm to my inexperience, her vulnerabilities mirroring mine. One afternoon, we walked through a nearby park, leaves crunching underfoot in the fall breeze. The conversation turned personal again. I mentioned feeling adrift without roots. She stopped, turning to me with a quiet intensity. "Thank you for being here, Tristan," she said, her hand brushing mine briefly, sending a spark through me. In that touch, I knew it wasn't just mentoring anymore. The connection had deepened, pulling us towards something unspoken, laced with the thrill of shared secrets and the weight of what it could mean. From that park bench onward, our meetings took on a new rhythm, one that blended the professional with something indefinably personal. The spark from her touch lingered in my thoughts like a quiet hum, making me replay the moment during sleepless nights in my apartment, where the city lights filtered through thin curtains. I told myself it was just gratitude, her wisdom pulling me out of my rut, but deep down I knew it was more. The age difference loomed in my mind, a silent reminder that she had lived through decades I'd only glimpsed in stories. She was in her early 40s, with lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter and loss, while I was still navigating my mid-20s feeling like a half-formed sketch. Yet it didn't push me away. It drew me closer, her experience as a map for my uncertainties. We settled on Tuesday mornings at 7:30 a.m., before the office filled with the clatter of keyboards and coffee runs. The small conference room in the back was our sanctuary. Dusty blinds half drawn, a table scarred from years of forgotten meetings. No presentations, no agendas. Just 2 mugs of black coffee steaming on the surface and her notebook, worn at the edges from constant use. She'd arrive first, her presence a steady anchor in the dim light, and I'd slip in quietly, my heart quickening at the sight of her. "This week, how do you see yourself?" she'd ask, her voice soft but probing, like peeling back layers of an onion without force. At first, the question unsettled me. I'd fidget with my mug, steam rising like unspoken doubts, and mumble responses that felt raw even to my own ears. "I see myself as a shadow," I said one morning, staring at the table's grain. "Slipping through the cracks, fixing things no one notices until they break." Another time, "Like a machine on repeat. Log in, debug, log out. No room for error, no space to breathe." And once vulnerability cracking my voice. Small, lacking skills, lacking faith in myself. Each admission hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years I'd spent burying them. She never interrupted or dismissed. Instead, she'd nod, her eyes holding mine with a patience that felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. Then she'd share fragments of her past, not as lectures, but as echoes of my own struggles. "I was a back office clerk once," she recounted during our second session, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on her notebook. "Printing name tags, pinning up memos. One day, I misspelled a VP's name on a badge. He hurled it at me in front of 40 people, snarling, 'People like you belong in the background.' That night, I drafted my resignation. But the next morning, I showed up. Not for him, but to prove I wouldn't stay hidden forever." Her stories weren't polished tales of triumph. They carried the grit of real life, the sweat of diner shifts, the sting of harassment she endured in silence because bills didn't care about dignity. "I needed the paycheck more than my pride back then," she'd say, her gaze distant, reliving the ache. Listening, I'd feel a knot loosen in my chest, her words bridging the years between us. She wasn't just older. She was a survivor who'd navigated the same shadows I was lost in, emerging with a quiet strength I yearned for. As the weeks blurred, she introduced small exercises, gentle nudges that felt intimate in their simplicity. Write down 5 things you did well this week, she'd instruct, handing me a blank page from her notebook. At first, my list was sparse. Fixed a server crash without overtime. But gradually, it grew. Spoke up in a team call. Helped a colleague debug code. Another task. Email your future self. Describe who you want to be. I sat in my apartment that night, fingers hovering over the keys, pouring out dreams I'd long suppressed. A stable life, confidence to lead, someone to share it with. Sending it to her felt vulnerable, like exposing a hidden scar, but her reply was simple. He's already emerging. And the rule for Tuesdays. No apologizing for your honest thoughts. It forced me to own my words, stripping away the self-doubt I'd worn like armor. These mornings became my lifeline, a ritual that healed in whispers rather than grand gestures. I'd arrive with the city's dawn chill clinging to my coat and leave with a warmth that lingered through the day. The age gap surfaced in subtle ways, her references to decades-past tech trends I'd only read about or her wry smiles at my youthful optimism, but it enriched rather than divided. She saw the boy in me, still grappling with independence, and I saw the woman who'd fought for hers, her resilience a beacon. One session after I practiced a mock presentation, she leaned back, her eyes soft. Tristan, you're not ordinary. You've just lived like one for too long. I laughed, but it caught in my throat, a mix of disbelief and gratitude. In her presence, I dared to dream. Of promotions, of stability, of a life beyond survival. Through it all, the connection deepened, her guidance a thread weaving through my days. I'd catch myself replaying her stories during commutes, her voice a soothing echo against the subway rumble. The exercises weren't magic. They were mirrors reflecting back a version of me I could finally face without flinching. For the first time, I stepped out of my cubicle to contribute ideas, sent proposals without second-guessing. I wasn't the star employee yet, but I was no longer invisible, to myself or others. And in those quiet mornings, as the office stirred awake outside, I realized healing wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was her staying, week after week, through the small acts. A shared coffee, a listened-to confession, that mended the fractures I hadn't known were there. That Monday, as I rode the elevator up to my floor, the glow from our Tuesday mornings still lingered like a quiet fire in my chest. I'd started carrying myself differently. Shoulders straighter, voice firmer in emails. The exercises had chipped away at my self-doubt, turning whispers of inadequacy into echoes I could challenge. Paul's stories replayed in my mind during coffee breaks, her resilience a template I traced over my own fears. The age gap felt less like a chasm and more like a gentle slope, her years offering shade where I'd burned in the sun of uncertainty. But beneath it all, a tension simmered, the unspoken pull between us growing with every shared glance or lingering touch on a notebook page. I wondered if she felt it too, or if I was reading too much into the warmth in her eyes. My phone buzzed mid-morning, an email from her, subject line blank. The body was terse. Friday, present back up from rock bottom to the full department. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just another exercise, it was exposure, thrusting our quiet world into the spotlight. I stared at the screen, heart racing, memories flooding back to our first frantic meeting in the restroom. Her vulnerability, my hesitant promise. She was trusting me with her vision, betting on the version of me she'd helped unearth. Doubt crept in. What if I fumbled? What if they saw through me, the invisible tech guy suddenly center stage? But her faith anchored me. I replied, ready. Simple, but it carried the weight of our shared mornings. The days blurred in preparation. I'd practice in my apartment mirror, pacing the worn carpet, her words echoing. You're not ordinary. By Thursday night, nerves twisted my gut as I ironed a fresh shirt, the fabric smooth under my hands like a promise of composure. Sleep evaded me, my mind drifting to her, how she'd endured worse rising from diner sinks to boardrooms. Her age, once a distant fact, now felt like a quiet strength, a lived wisdom that made my 25 years seem both fragile and full of potential. I imagined her watching me present, her steady gaze a lifeline amid the scrutiny. Friday arrived crisp and unforgiving. The eighth floor conference room was a sea of pressed shirts and laptops, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and expectation. Over 50 people filled the seats, managers, peers, even a few execs. I stood at the podium, palms slick, the projector humming behind me. My slides were clean, but my opener wasn't scripted. I used to be the guy lost in the weeds, logging overtime, fixing glitches no one saw until they broke. Without this program, I might have quit, abandoning the dream of building something real. The room hushed. I spoke of our Tuesday dawns, the coffee, the confessions, the way one person's belief pulled another from the brink. It's about extending a hand when someone's dangling, I said, my voice gaining strength. The final slide glowed. We don't pity, we empower. Applause started sparse, then swelled, a wave of nods and murmurs washing over me. As I stepped down, Paul's eyes met mine from the back, silent, shining, with something deeper than pride. But the high faded fast. Whispers slithered through the hall's post-meeting. That tech kid and Paul? Something's up. Weird, she's mentoring him one-on-one. Age difference like that? Looks maternal, not, you know. My cheeks burned. The gap between us, once private, now felt exposed, twisted into gossip fodder. I buried myself in work, but the afternoon brought a summons to HR. My pulse thundered as I entered the sterile office, Paul already there, seated with composed grace. The HR director, a stern woman in her 50s, flipped through a file. We don't ban office relationships, she said evenly, but we require transparency. And courage. The air tightened, electric with unspoken accusations. Paul's chin lifted slightly, her poise unbroken. I'll take full responsibility for any policy breach, she stated, her voice steady. But if you're asking if I value this person, yes, deeply. Her words hung vulnerable yet defiant, bridging our mornings to this moment. Emotions surged in me, gratitude, fear, a fierce protectiveness. Without thinking, I reached for her hand across the table, our fingers intertwining for the first time in public. It wasn't dramatic, it was real, her skin warm against mine, a silent vow amid the scrutiny. We left together, the hallway blurring as we walked to the parking garage. The city buzzed outside, indifferent to our turmoil. In the elevator, she turned to me. Are you scared? When the world sees you as wrong, just for choosing someone older? Her eyes searched mine, the years between us a tangible thread. Her wisdom a shield, my youth a spark. I didn't answer immediately. We stopped at a street vendor for sandwiches, the sizzle of bread on the grill grounding me. Sitting on a bench, wrappers crinkling, I finally spoke. I am scared. But I'm more afraid of leaving you to face it alone. Tears glistened in her eyes, unspoken. No more words needed. We'd crossed the line of judgments, hand in hand. 2 months after that HR meeting where we'd laid our connection bare and weathered the initial storm of whispers, Paul and I settled into a rhythm that felt both exposed and serene. The office gossip had fizzled into occasional sidelong glances, but we'd crossed that bridge, our hands linked in defiance, and now life unfolded with a quiet normalcy I hadn't known I craved. No more stolen glances across crowded hallways. Instead, it was her subtle nod as we passed in the lobby, or the warm coffee mug she'd leave on my desk with a sticky note, fuel for the day. Texts flowed freely now, no frantic deletions, just simple check-ins like, rough meeting, call me later. The age gap, once a shadow in my thoughts, became a gentle undercurrent. Her steady wisdom grounding my impulsive energy, my fresh perspective lightening her guarded heart. It wasn't dramatic, it was real. A slow weave of two lives that had found each other in the unlikeliest place. We dove deeper into the Backup from Rock Bottom program, expanding it to 2 satellite offices across the state. I'd handle the presentations standing before rooms of skeptical faces, my voice no longer trembling as I shared how one person's belief could rewrite someone's story. Paul backed me with strategy, crisp emails to execs, refined slides that turned my rough ideas into polished proposals. For the first time, work wasn't just survival, it was creation, building something bigger than us. I'd drive to those branches, the highway blurring past, my mind drifting to her. how her resilience had sparked this, how our shared scars fueled it. The program wasn't just saving juniors like me, it was healing us too. A quiet rebellion against the corporate grind that had nearly broken us both. Her over 40 perspective added depth, spotting pitfalls I'd miss, while my youth brought fresh tech integrations she admired. The difference in our years felt like harmony now, not hindrance. A duet where her experience led and my eagerness followed. Evenings became our sanctuary, a counterpoint to the day's bustle. Instead of collapsing alone in my old apartment with a microwave meal and the hum of my laptop, I'd head to hers. A cozy unit overlooking a small lake on the city's edge where the water rippled under streetlights like whispered secrets. We'd share a hot milk on the balcony, the steam curling in the cool air, talking finances for the month ahead or just sitting in comfortable silence, watching the distant glow of downtown. I'd lean back, her head on my shoulder, feeling the subtle weight of her, over a decade my senior, yet fitting perfectly against me. The age whispered in small ways. Her stories of past decades I'd only read about in history apps or how she'd tease my millennial shortcuts with a fond eye roll. But it deepened the warmth. Her maturity offered a stability I'd craved since my parents split, while my energy reminded her of joys she'd set aside in her climb. At work, she remained the ironclad leader, sharp when I missed a deadline, frowning at my mismatched color schemes and decks. "Tristan, timelines aren't suggestions," she'd say, her tone firm but fair, echoing the boardroom powerhouse who'd once commanded silence. Yet, when screens dimmed and doors clicked shut, she softened, a light touch on my arm, asking, "Tired today?" I made soup. It hit me then. True love wasn't fireworks or grand escapes. It was her remembering my favorite comfort food after a long day, us sharing the mundane like partners in a quiet dance. The gap in our ages made it richer, her knowing glances when I vented about youth's pressures, my patience when she unpacked the weight of years in leadership. We weren't hiding anymore, but we didn't flaunt it either, just lived, letting the world adjust around us. We moved into a modest lakeside apartment together, no fanfare or announcements. It was practical at first, closer commutes, shared bills, but it bloomed into home. She added a bookshelf, filling it with worn novels from her past while I installed a wooden coat rack, the kind I'd dreamed of in my transient days. Weekends blurred into simple rituals, cooking side by side, her chopping vegetables with precise strokes honed from years of self-reliance, me fumbling but learning under her gentle guidance. We'd clean up, her tying trash bags with efficient knots, me scrubbing counters, our movement syncing like we'd always been a team. The program evolved too, new versions with virtual sessions, us brainstorming over takeout, her experience tempering my bold ideas. One Sunday afternoon, my younger brother dropped by unannounced. He eyed the place, the books, the rack, the simmering pot on the stove, then me, the brother who'd once borrowed cash for rent, now stirring soup with a contented smile. Paul excused herself to the balcony with the trash, giving us space. He watched her go, then turned. "You happy, man?" I paused, glancing out at her silhouette against the lake, her form carrying the quiet strength of someone who'd rebuilt herself brick by brick. My hands, once calloused from endless fixes, now held a spoon with ease. "I never thought happiness could feel this peaceful," I said, my voice thick with unspoken gratitude. We weren't CEOs jetting off or throwing lavish weddings. No, we were just two people. Her in her 40s, me in my 20s, crafting trust for the weary, starting from a frantic grip in a restroom where vulnerabilities couldn't hide. Love didn't begin with a confession, it sparked from a hand extended in desperation, growing into this. Evenings of shared silence, hearts full, no fanfare needed.